Hello, my name is Tylluan Penry and today's little chat is coming to you via the Wolf and Howl Press and its YouTube channel. I'm a solitary pagan witch, and in our last little chat I was telling you about the only thing I believe you need as a tool is to have a little hardback book. And today I thought I would tell you a little bit about the sorts of things you can write in it. Now, as part of the background noise, you may hear some rather strange snoring. This is not Mr. Penry. This is our dogs, who are lying here in the kitchen, very comfortable and snoring. So any interference in that sense, I hope you don't nod off, but there we go. Anyway, back to the business of hardback books. Over the years, I've had any number of these. Some a bit more impressive than others. As I got older, I tended to treat myself to one nice book a year. But when you're starting out, you'll probably find that you may well get through more than one book. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that you're going to jot down the things that matter to you. And this is very important, that you actually jot them down yourself. Pencil, biro, fountain pen, doesn't matter. What matters is that you get away from the idea of finding something you like on the internet, copying, pasting and dropping it into a document. Now, there's a good reason why this doesn't really do the business when it comes to charting your spiritual or magical path. And this is because as we progress, any pagan path, doesn't matter whether we're druids or wiccans or witches or what have you, any pagan path, what matters is that mentally we are starting to make choices. We are starting to make decisions about what we want to include and what we don't want to include. If you have to go through the rigmarole of writing things out by hand, then you will find very soon that you make these decisions quite firmly. It's quite a long task to write things out by hand. I know I find it very difficult, but it's important because if you simply copy big chunks, you're taking everything down. And in fact, all you often want is a little kernel, a little nugget. The sort of things I've written down, and here's a couple of them from fairly recent dates. I think most of these are the last 10 years. What did I do in this one? Well, it was upside down. All sorts of things. I got into things like Beowulf. I got into a lot of Anglo-Saxon stuff in this one. On this one, I started off... oh, what did I write? I started off writing about ritual, and I ended up writing about runes. And that was all in the course of literally about 8 months. And I think it shows how we start off in one place and we can end up somewhere we never thought of when we began our book. And this is why I recommend having a hardback book, because you're not so tempted to pull pages out. You know, one of the problems when you start off is that you're very eager and you write loads down, and after about 5-6 months you look back on it and you're like, oh no, what did I do that for? That's so embarrassing, quick! And you want to rip it out and get rid of it. If you have a hardback book, you can't. I mean, you can rip pages out, but it's not so good and it damages the book. So I would say no, leave it there, because who knows, in a couple of years' time, and I've had this happen to me a lot, in a couple of years' time, you come back to it and you think, oh, now hang on, I may not agree with all of that, but there's something there I need to go back to and look into. And this is what a pagan path is really all about, because there is no fixed boundary for paganism. You can't say, oh, it's here and no further. It doesn't work like that. There is no fixed knowledge, no fixed boundary. It's up to you and me to go out and find where our boundaries lie. What are we prepared to pursue? What interests us? And I know everybody wants to have a nice big book of shadows, but to be honest with you, it's these rather scruffy looking books with all their bits and pieces. And I've gone back to this one because it's a good example. I have all sorts of things, cuttings of rings and circles on old stones in the north of England. Things that have interested me. I may not have pursued them straight away, but I will often, I mean, I didn't even get round to sticking these in, though I intended to. They are things that I will keep and then maybe go back to a few years later. I think this one was about 2004, 2003, 2004. And you go back to it again, you think, oh yes, I've got to go and look at that. That's important. And these are the things that make our path what it is. Now, I will say, just before I finish, you can put all sorts of things into your book. It doesn't matter. What I tended to do, because my books were really, really full of a huge range of things, was I tended to put a little index, a very simple index in the back. Only takes up a few pages just to give me some idea what was in the book. And the other thing I would sometimes do is if I had something I particularly liked, like a spell, and spells are really important, by the way. If you're going to do any kind of magic, please write it down in your book. Write down how you think about it, how you get there, what you're aiming to do, the spell you use, obviously, the day of the week, the hour of the day, moon phase, anything. Because if that spell is wildly successful, you may want to go back and repeat it. And if it's wildly unsuccessful, you may want to go back at some point and discover why it didn't work. But the other thing I do is when I find a spell I particularly like, or a meditation or invocation I particularly like, what I used to do then at one stage was I used to copy them out into this book, which is my best, if you like, for that particular time. And I would write them, and I would, I don't know whether you can see it there, it's sort of pictures, engravings, even things I would stick, pieces of paper I like, wrapping paper I like, and I would stick them in to make this book somehow special. But what you must always remember is this is your book. It's not my book. It's not your friend's book. The best books are those that are written just for you. So you don't go around handing it out saying, oh, look at this, because sooner or later somebody is going to turn around and say, oh, I wouldn't have written that. And you will feel so crushed and so defeated, you may never want to write in your book again. So remember that these magical journals, if we want to call them that, or books of our path, or whatever you want to call it, like the best diaries, they're for your eyes alone. They're not for anybody else. You know, they always say the best diary is one that is never read by anybody except the person who wrote it, because then you're able to be much more honest. And honesty is essential in the course of any spiritual path, pagan or otherwise. You have got to be honest with yourself. Lie to me by all means, but please be honest with yourself. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.